Welcome to the Scam Economy with your host, Matt Binder.
Indicted, arrested, and arraigned. What a week it has been for Donald J. Trump, whom around these parts on the scam economy, we know him more as the founder of the Trump Cards NFTs. Now, Trump may not have gotten in trouble for his cryptocurrency activities, but he certainly isn't the only crypto entrepreneur getting in trouble with the law lately. Let's just put NFT artist Donald Trump to the side for a moment and focus on these four horsemen of the crypto apocalypse. From a fugitive who was on the run to a crypto founder that was defrauding his followers. On this week's episode of Scam Economy, we're going to talk about Terra founder Do Kwon, TRON founder Justin Sun, Binance founder CZ, and of course, we'll make a little room for FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried. But before we dive into the crypto crimes, let's talk about someone whose books aren't being fudged around with, and that's me, your host, Matt Binder. To support this show and what I do, be sure to go to patreon.com/MattBinder to become a monthly paying subscriber. Your support helps this show grow. And of course, you can find the audio podcast version of this show at scameconomy.com and the video version of this show at youtube.com/MattBinder. Now let's get into the four biggest names, a few of which who will very likely find themselves going from being on the blockchain to being behind bars. And joining me now to discuss all of this, and there are quite a few newly minted crypto criminals, alleged criminals, to discuss, is freelance journalist Jacob Silverman. He writes about tech and crypto, and he's the host of the new 4-episode podcast for CBC called Naked Emperor, all about FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried. Jacob, welcome back to Scam Economy.
Glad to be here again. Thank you. It's always fun.
I'm so glad to have you here because I gotta say, the marketing department at CBC is unbelievable. Timing this podcast's 4-episode release, they came out one by one, right? They didn't all drop at once.
Yep.
Timing this 4-episode release as we get 3 different sorts of indictments and charges against various, I should say, major crypto figures, one by one. I mean, I feel like the fact that there are 4 people we're talking about today on a show where you just came out with your 4-episode podcast, it's like, wow, amazing marketing over there.
Well, I was internally, not that I'm very experienced with podcasting before this, but I was arguing for them to gently saying, I think we should release it all at once so people could binge it. And partly because selfishly, I was afraid that something would happen or Sam Bankman-Fried would change his plea. Just things that would make it a little more difficult on my end. Not that matters in comparison to like the actual news. So it did kind of work out pretty well. We had our last episode released today, Monday, when we're recording this. Or is it today, Tuesday? I'm losing track now.
No, today is Monday, right? But people will hear this on Wednesday. It's all just a mishmash of time.
It's just a flow of time. Right? Anyway, the 4 episodes are out, and I mean, honestly, I think it has kind of dovetailed nicely with the news cycle. I mean, there was a superseding indictment against Sam Bankman-Fried. Nishad Singh had one of his colleagues has turned against him, but we're still sort of on the same kind of trajectory, it seems, where Sam will go on trial in October. And then, as you said, we've had these other major crypto figures face either criminal charges or major civil complaints. And it does feel like the net is sort of gradually closing in on the cartel.
Right. And we're gonna focus on those other 3, the new 3 members of the real reality TV show, I guess we could call Orange is the New Blockchain. But let's for a quick few minutes talk about Sam Bankman-Fried. Now, I know you actually, and you know, this made you a perfect person to host this podcast about what's been going on at FTX and with SBF. You actually had exchanged messages with him. And you also, this was before everything fell to pieces, but you also, if I recall, while working on your upcoming book, you had met with him too, right?
Yeah, we met once in person, and we did exchange some DMs. I wouldn't say we had a prolific correspondence. I mean, this all started in the spring of last year, so almost a year ago. But I've thought about what it meant, and it was more. He wasn't a source, really. I think I misspoke in a recent podcast and kind of called him a source, but it was kind of like a journalist-subject relationship, I'd say, in that I'd ask him questions sometimes, or sometimes he'd respond privately to my public tweets. And I think part of it, and we explore this a little bit on the show, but I think part of it is, Sam was up at all hours. You could point to reasons why, but he liked to talk to people. I mean, he certainly was cunning in his own way, or is, and was constructing an elaborate political influence operation. But, he kept tabs on journalists and he talked to a lot of people, I think. I haven't really talked to many other journalists who DM'd with him much, but yeah, the main things he DM'd me about were why Tether wasn't a scam, and sort of also trying to steer me away from being too much of a crypto critic. Like I think like most journalists would, I was intrigued by it all and went along for the ride and said, okay, let's keep talking. But I was, suspect and dubious about it all.
Right, right. So, we've talked about on this show, we've done numerous episodes on FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried, and you have, packed 4 episodes of stuff that really goes deeper into, your own experience with him and what's been going on since. But really quick, just so we could sort of place him on this sort of scale of these 4 guys as we go on. Can you briefly, just like in a minute, remind people what is he being accused of doing?
Sure. Well, he's facing 13 felony charges at the moment. The number's gone up a couple times, and most of them are just sort of familiar forms of fraud or money laundering or conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Basically, all the crimes you end up committing, it seems, in the course of kind of stealing money in the world of crypto. So the main act he's accused of is taking up to perhaps $12 billion, the number is still kind of up in the air, of FTX cryptocurrency exchange customer funds, real dollars that people put in to buy crypto, and then diverting that to Alameda, his hedge fund, from where it was used for all kinds of things, from personal loans to real estate to making some really bad bets on the crypto markets. So most of the crimes Sam is accused of relate to that, to this misappropriation of money, which is fraud. What I think is interesting about the story in some ways and about our podcast is that it doesn't have a lot to do with crypto in some ways. I mean, crypto matters and it's part of the story. You can tell it from a sort of crypto focus or crypto first perspective, but we don't on the podcast because this is sort of supposed to explain to the lay person like what really happened here. What do we know? And that's the main thing we know is that at least according to several other company executives who have already pleaded guilty and implicated Sam, he allegedly misappropriated up to $12 billion. And, in the process did all kinds of other potential crimes. There's also charges of campaign finance violations, that he funneled money through straw donors, one of whom apparently was Nishad Singh, his former colleague, to various politicians on both sides. And then the big one that was added last week was that he was a bribery charge, that he authorized at least $40 million worth of crypto to bribe some Chinese officials to unfreeze some accounts that Alameda had in China on Chinese exchanges with up to $1 billion worth of crypto. I think this was 2019. I'd have to double check, but or maybe it was actually 2021. But I think that's also worth noting. Like because I have these open questions about what was Alameda up to in Asia when they were based in Hong Kong for a while before going to the Bahamas and stuff like that, and that's pretty serious stuff to have $1 billion worth of crypto on some Chinese exchanges, which is not the friendliest market, and then to be bribing Chinese officials at that level. That is something really serious.
Right, right.
So anyway, he could go to jail forever.
Right, yeah, it's not looking good for him, and I think a lot of people, this was a big story when it broke in November because it was sort of juicy how it all sort of went down, with there were these rumors of like leaked financials, and legit reporters then got their hands on them and reported on what it looked like, and it looked like they didn't have much of any liquid, capital on hand. And then the word got around, and Binance decides to sell off the FTX token, FTT token, and everyone starts withdrawing from FTX, and it's just, and Sam Bankman-Fried, while this, in the lead up to this, he had portrayed himself, or was trying to portray himself as this like savior of crypto. Whenever a company would land on hard times, he would swoop in and save them, and he was spending money on lobbying and meeting with politicians, also putting himself forward as like the face of crypto. So yeah, everything came together for this guy. The collapse of this guy to be a pretty big deal when it eventually happened. But I do feel like these, not all three of them, but I would say at least 2 out of 3 of them, I think, actually have the potential to be even juicier, honestly, depending on, and I could be wrong, maybe all 3 even. You could correct me if I'm wrong here. So let's start with the one I think people should hear about first, because his failure sort of started this whole crypto collapse last year. And that is, of course, the founder of the cryptocurrencies Terra and Luna, Do Kwon.
Right, right. You might get my cat in the frame, or
Oh, that's great. No, hello. What's the name of the cat?
His name is Harry. He cannot be stopped if he wants to come. Anyway, yeah. Do Kwon, for those who haven't been following along, he has been a fugitive from South Korean justice for many months. About a year ago, actually, his stable coin called Terra started unraveling, and basically the associated coins and his whole empire, which, when we talk about numbers in crypto, especially now, they're always sort of notional. They're theoretical. Like, you're never going to cash out for the $1 billion worth of Bitcoin, even if it says $1 billion. So, supposedly Do Kwon's empire is worth some $40+ billion, all those tokens together. But so it was a major crash. But was that $40 billion worth of real money? Not really. But anyway, this is kind of what kicked off the latest collapse, latest crypto winter. And also, I think, if we're looking for commonalities here and sort of threads between all of these folks, well, one, they all did business with each other. I sort of use the word cartel sometimes, and I'm starting to take that idea more seriously. But also, they all owed each other. There wasn't that much real money in the system. And a lot of people were sort of keeping the plates juggling, or just simply minting their own tokens out of thin air. And all these kinds of vulnerabilities started being exposed, I think, with Terra and Luna, and then, which was certainly the first major domino, but now it's something that we then saw throughout the crypto ecosystem, was that there was very little real money. There was a lot of fraud. It was very hard for people to pay each other back once loans were being called in and stuff like that. So, yeah, Terra certainly kicked it off. And Do Kwon was arrested last week in Montenegro, of all places. There had been some rumors he had gone to Serbia, but I'm not sure on the exact extradition situation there. I think what some people need to realize is that, like, their extradition treaties, and I'm not an expert in this kind of law, but just because a country doesn't have an official treaty or extradition agreement with the U.S., that doesn't mean these folks are safe, especially if a country like the United States comes calling. So, like, you have the 3AC guys are in who went bankrupt pretty quickly after Terra, and are part of this whole story. They've tried to reinvent themselves and are now supposedly living in Indonesia and the UAE, which are supposed to be non-extradition countries. But again, like those are American allies, and if America wants to favor trade or arrest these guys, I'm sure they'll be able to. So we saw Do Kwon being shuffled into a van, and him and a business partner. Of course, he's always on that grind. So he started a new company in Montenegro, with helped along by some lawyers who seem to be like the guys who you use for crypto business if you're in that region. And I can't believe that they didn't know who he was. And his extradition is being requested by the U.S. and South Korea. So he had been charged with various financial crimes in South Korea, which is where his business was really centered for a while. But now it seems the U.S. wants a piece of him too. And I think these guys are going to become pretty familiar pretty quickly with the punitive nature of the American justice system.
Right. We should say Do Kwon, he was a fugitive for quite a while. Like he was on the lam for a decent chunk of time.
Yeah, months. And there was talk of, I mean, I believe that he had a fake Costa Rican passport when he was recently apprehended at the airport there. These guys are talking about like, and he would shit talk on Twitter saying like, oh, I'm not really a fugitive. But I think that a couple of things we have to learn about these folks is that, or sort of this type of person, so call them the crypto fugitive and the perhaps potential crypto fugitives, is like, well, one, they're happy to lie. Do Kwon was never telling the truth about anything really, and neither was Sam Bankman-Fried up until everything collapsed. He even insisted past the time it collapsed that FTX US was solvent, which apparently wasn't true. So like these guys will lie as long as they can, but also, despite the fact that they seem sometimes kind of amateurish or clownish, they are connected potentially to like kind of traditional criminal networks. Partly because I think crypto is good for money laundering and for illicit finance on an international scale. So like, there's no surprise, I think, that someone like Do Kwon had the resources to leave Singapore, where he was when South Korea charged him. Right. His South Korean passport was canceled. He somehow left Singapore, which is a fairly authoritarian country and certainly a surveillance state, and maybe left under another passport, maybe left on a ship. And then made to Serbia and had at least another passport for Costa Rica. So, like, they may not be the world's most sophisticated criminals, but, they do resemble kind of in some ways like old-fashioned international criminals dealing in illicit finance and fake identities and things like that.
Right. They certainly have the means. Like, I think that's something people should understand. Like,
right.
Like when we talk about the money not being there, yeah, their multi-billion-dollar empires are fake, but the money they do extract from people who buy their tokens or invest in them, they pretty much just use it for themselves. And that's a lot, and that's a lot of money for an individual. Not enough to claim you're a multi-billion-dollar company, but it's certainly enough for an individual to go jet setting under various secret identities.
Yeah, and it's reasonable to think that some of these guys, including Do Kwon, cashed out along the way. I mean, they may not have $1 billion in the bank, but they could have 60 million in a Swiss bank account or something, which would certainly keep you running for a while or something like that. And I think some of the accusations that are emerging are that maybe some of these people used each other to help them cash out, or even in his written testimony that he never got to deliver for Congress, Sam Bankman-Fried includes screenshots, I think very deliberately, of group chats with CZ and others in the industry. There's including one called Exchange Coordination. So there's certainly, there's been talk about this for years, rumors, but we haven't really seen screenshots of high-level executives in the industry seemingly debating or coordinating activity. And I think that is the kind of thing that exists here. I think crypto is a small club. I mean, Bitfinex, the popular online critic, has been saying this since the beginning, which is that, it's really like 15 guys. Right. And the way you see crypto move around and sort of the deals that are made and stuff, it's hard not to think that sometimes. I mean, just look at everyone we're talking about this episode. They're all connected. CZ helped provide early startup funding for for FTX. He also helped knock over FTX by selling the FTT. Justin Sun was offering a bailout package for FTX. I mean, of course, it wasn't going to work, but like all these guys seem inevitably connected. Justin Sun seems to be sending a lot of money to Binance. You can see that on chain. So, you don't have to be conspiratorial to start seeing that it just simply is a small world. Including the way in which after FTX went down, you had all the people who went bankrupt in the 6 months before, like Celsius and 3AC and these others, start blaming Sam Bankman-Fried and saying, oh, Alameda was hunting our positions or manipulating markets or whatever else. Like, the guy that they've been doing business with a few months earlier was now the guy that had allegedly took them all down and would suffer for the industry, for the industry sins. So, and then if you even just look at the notional market cap for crypto, right now it's over $1 trillion, I think. I mean, that's not a lot of money. That's like Apple,
Right.
One Apple computer,
Right.
which obviously is one of the biggest companies in the world. But like,
Entire
we throw
industry.
these big numbers around, but I think it's worth keeping in mind that that these numbers are both real and fake. And they also kind of reflect a very small market where these people really do know each other and talk to each other all day.
Right. I love the fact that a slew of these guys were all in a group chat labeled crimes. Like they titled it crimes. Like it's amazing.
I know. I felt like it was. I think I said to someone as a RICO charge in the title. Like, I mean, my personal theory for that is that Sam did that intentionally, obviously, because, I mean, I don't. I'm not the Department of Justice, but I would think that if they saw that, they would immediately try to subpoena everyone in that group chat or subpoena a full copy of that chat and those people's phones and everything, to look at facilitation of fraud and insider trading, all these other things, securities fraud, etc. But so it felt like Sam pulled the pin on a grenade and said, if I'm going down, you guys are going down too.
Right.
Exposing the kind of collusion that a lot of people figured was there.
Right.
That was kind of my theory.
And we'll get into him in a second, but it's got to be that, he obviously looks at CZ of Binance as probably why he's in the predicament he's in, because he keeps bringing up, like he's constantly brought up that if he only had more time, he thinks he could have raised the funds and made everybody whole and everything and fixed everything. And he also brings up that like his legal counsel, convinced him to file for bankruptcy when he shouldn't. But this all stems from the fact that once Binance decided that they were out of their FTT holdings, that everything began to collapse right then and there. Like he's got to have this resentment of CZ.
Yeah, I mean, as sort of a business drama, it's a pretty good story, because in some ways, even like Sam's an interesting character, but he's a little bit boring. But like the drama that these guys are caught up in, which is that, especially for folks who may not know crypto as well, like yes, as you said earlier, Sam was the face of crypto. He was, so what? He was donating to every politician under the sun. He was going to make crypto safe for the masses. That was sort of the mainstream vision of him. And he was untouchable in some ways, and he was probably the second most important figure in crypto next to CZ. And because all these companies are so entangled, what happened was, as some folks know, at one point Sam a couple of years ago decided he wanted to part ways from Binance. Binance owned a share of FTX because they had funded them early on or invested in them, and so he bought out Binance with fake money, with I believe it was BUSD, the Binance stablecoin, and with FTT, the FTT token. And so when you do that, when you give your sort of once and future rival hundreds of millions of dollars worth of your own token as a crypto company, you're giving them kind of the means to destroy you if they want to dump it on the market in the future. At least is how I read that. I think Sam was probably desperate to get away from Binance and was probably too arrogant to think that CZ would ever do something like that. But, in a lot of ways, Binance says this, and I actually kind of agree. Like, Sam and company are responsible for FTX going down. But the timing and manner, of course, I think were influenced by CZ and Binance and what they did. I mean, CZ, when the balance sheet leaked, it showed things were a mess over there. And then CZ saw an opportunity from sort of a, kind of a cunning corporate operator perspective. And he's like, all right, I'm going to dump my FTT. I mean, he said it very politely, but it was basically him saying, "I'll take a 500 or 800 million dollar loss, however much it was worth at the time, by dumping this stuff on the market just to screw you over." And that's how I read that. And then, of course, all within a couple days, there's a scrambling for a rescue package from everyone under the sun. Excuse me, from including Justin Sun, and then pardon me,
That was actually pretty good.
And then he capitulates to CZ, and they had this letter of intent that Binance is going to buy FTX for probably pennies on the dollar. And I think very notably, Sam said something on Twitter to the effect of like, "And to a certain unnamed rival, you won," or something like that. He gave in, and Sam is an arrogant guy, like a lot of CEOs, I think. And then CZ did something even more cunning, which is that after a day or two, he said, "Actually, the books don't look so good, and we can't fix this. We're pulling out. It's just a letter of intent, so no, thank you." And that really is a pretty back alley move. And it worked. And that's when you finally have FTX tipping over. And this is all within the space of a week, of course. And then within a month, Sam is in handcuffs. So that's the drama, I think, and the story that we try to tell in the podcast, too. And why this all seems so kind of insane from crypto obsessives, even people like us who are critics but obsessed with the dark side, is that, like, no one thought it would really go down this way, I think. Like, we have questions about all these guys, and they're pretty much all guys. But, people thought that the eventual crypto apocalypse would kind of proceed differently.
Right. I mean, I think actually this segment we just did right here is actually like the perfect encapsulation of just how entwined all these figures are. Because I want to remind people, we are still in the Do Kwon segment of this episode. We haven't moved on officially to CZ or Justin Sun yet. And just in the story of Do Kwon, you just can't help but bring, and this could have happened in any of these segments, you just can't help but bring up how they were in cahoots or working with or secretly trying to screw over another one of these major crypto players.
And I can also go on long tangents, so that it's not just the relationships. It's all blab about any of these guys.
So to just close up the Do Kwon segment, though,
sure.
He there was an Interpol like red notice out for him. Like, that's how serious this was. And so Terra Luna failed. I know he tried to then, instead of just let people know it was dead, it was over, he tried to restart it, and then that immediately collapsed. And I'm sure he made some money off of that one when he launched like Luna 2. And then, like you just mentioned, he was starting some new project that I don't think got off the ground yet. So what? And I know South Korea and both the U.S. are taking a look at him and have charged him. What exactly are they alleging that he did?
I think the crimes are again certain types of financial fraud. I'm not sure if there's been an unsealed. Pardon me, I should have looked this up before,
fine.
but I'm not sure if there's been an indictment unsealed yet in the U.S. Just we know at least that his extradition has been requested. But usually there's also the situation with Do Kwon. There's also other things besides Terra and Luna. Like, he had been subpoenaed earlier by the SEC for this Mirror, this sort of protocol he made that it basically created mirror or like a token versions of real stocks. He kind of made a mirrored version of the U.S. stock market. And there was a kind of infamous incident a couple of years ago at a conference in New York where the SEC tried to serve him with a subpoena, and he said no, and then he had been fighting the subpoena. That could potentially be, I mean, besides trying to fight the subpoena, he may have been committing some form of securities fraud by basically replicating the U.S. stock market synthetically. I
have it right in front of me now. He already had civil charges filed against him by the SEC. Right. But the Department of Justice is, charging him with conspiracy to defraud, commodities fraud, securities fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to engage in market manipulation.
Right.
The filing alleges, and this is from CoinDesk, alleged that Kwon made a number of untrue and misleading statements of material fact over the course of several years, citing TV appearances and tweets from the accounts tied to Terraform Labs, which is like the
Yep.
official company behind the stablecoin Terra and its sister token Luna.
Well, that actually raises a couple good points too, and thank you for looking that up. One thing I've sort of decided is that all these guys kind of end up committing the same crimes just in the course of doing business, frankly, because they're all doing various unregistered securities and commodities offerings, depending on how you define this stuff, and they're doing it overseas usually, and maybe illegally accessing U.S. markets or banking system. Like, it's just like as a matter of course, almost they're committing like 7 felonies of various types by just doing this stuff.
It's
And
built
then
into
when
the
you get into like,
business.
yeah, and then when you get into sort of deliberate um, criminality, you can add a few more on. Like, and the other thing that stands out to me there is the misleading statements. So that or misrepresentations. That's fraud, usually. So if you misrepresent what you're doing with investors' money, or you lie to your investors or something like that. And these guys are always posting or always making, as Kadam Shuber, who writes for the Financial Times, told us in our podcast, these guys are, I'm not sure if this line made it to air, but he was talking about how they're always making content, these guys. They're always tweeting or doing videos or whatever. Some of them are always up on amphetamines, we know. So there's like a deep corpus of text and statements from them that you can just match again, that authorities are already matching against actual financial records and business records to say, no, you lied. So, and that's fraud, depending on the situation. So we have tweets from these guys, from various people appearing in indictments against Caroline Ellison or Do Kwon or SBF or all these other people, or that guy whose name I forgot who manipulated the mango market and then like posted all about how he did it. And then his whole tweets got his name is Eliezer, I think. And then he recently got arrested, and the whole tweet thread was in the indictment. Like, I don't think these guys realize that they've been providing the fuel, like, and the evidence, that like literal copy paste job for future indictments, and we're seeing that play out. So that's another thing with the idea of like lying and misrepresentations in these public appearances. Like, you just gotta get some lawyers at the Department of Justice to start going through this stuff, and they'll find it.
Right. I do have to say that I respect the true poster mentality of these guys, where they're so online they can't help but just share their crimes because it makes for good content.
Of course, and more seriously, but not too seriously, like posting is part of the job. Like, it's all hype, and fakery kind of, because there's very little underlying value, blah blah blah. So the inherent critiques of crypto, which we could go over, but like, so in the absence of that, you have to post, you have to market, you have to push, you have to be exciting, you have to seem like you have some big ambitious roadmap, like you're going to change everything. Like, Do Kwon had this famous statement where in a chat someone said, like, how do we know you won't just rug pull? And he said something about how it wasn't in his interest, or like it wasn't his 3 billion wasn't his price to rug pull, how like he wanted to get his stablecoin up to something like 100 billion. But it's like, how can you trust anyone who says something like that? 3 billion will tempt anyone.
Right.
But these statements are out there, and they'll be in every indictment and documentary from here to eternity.
I think this is a perfect place to move to Justin Sun, because this is a guy who, out of all four of them, I think, in my opinion, and I will add this addendum up front, that out of all four of the people we've been speaking about, or and we'll get more into CZ in a bit, Justin Sun's the one I personally am the least familiar with. However, I am familiar with him in the sense that out of all four of them, he seems to embody that online hype man more than any of them, because the other guys at least went through, or continue to go through, the facade of being business guys. They have companies. They're running a business. They go out of their way to do the whole lobbying and meeting with other business people and signing deals and with the major entities that are not in the crypto world, trying to legitimize what they're doing. Whereas Justin Sun, as far as I've seen, everything about him is just hype on the internet from usually his personal account too. It's not even like he goes by his various company accounts or something.
Yeah, I find him hilarious. Just in this um, journalistic or storyteller perspective, I just think he's a great character in some ways. But there's an article I always recommend. It's called something like "The Many Escapes of Justin Sun." It's on the Verge website. It's a great history of basically how this guy has been jumping from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, including places like the Bay Area. I think he was in Tokyo, South Korea. He's been all over. He's originally from China, and now he's in the Caribbean mostly. But he's been talking up Hong Kong a lot on Twitter. And you never really know. You know what some of his projects are, but you don't know if he owns certain companies or has a controlling interest in them. But he'll still be promoting them or sort of, or saying he has some affiliation. And there's a really kind of stupid but funny meme that says like that has him sitting there smiling and he's going, "I'm announcing that tomorrow I will make an announcement," or something like that. I subscribe to his Telegram feed, and it's like that every day. That like, he's teasing interviews with like third tier hip hop artists like weeks in advance, and like everything he's doing is amazing and like nation state level, but also so cool. And there are definitely a lot of bots. His main company is TRON, and the TRON protocol, which receives a lot of Tether. So there are tons of Tron bots, and every post he makes is responded to by tons of bots. But he's kind of like the clown prince of crypto or something. It's like, I made a joke like when he on another podcast about like when he was talking about bailing out FTX, it was sort of like if the Harlem Globetrotters bailed out the New York Knicks or something like that. Like he's really hard to take seriously, but at the same time, he also happens to be a major player. At least it seems like one in whatever counts as major player in crypto. So one example, just, we know that Tron is his baby, that blockchain, and it's a major Tether partner. But he used to own Poloniex, which is an exchange. I believe he sold it and bought it back. He has a stable coin called USDD, which he does acknowledge. There's another one called TUSD, which I don't think he acknowledges. He has been bragging about an affiliation with Huobi, a major Asian exchange, for probably a year now. And for a while, it was just like he was an advisor, but then everyone thought maybe he bought out someone's share and no one confirmed it. But now the company basically now it's like he is the guy running Huobi, even though he's not the owner or CEO of Huobi. So it's just, and you could point to several other companies and things like that. I'm missing the best part, which is that last year he became a Granadan diplomat, the island nation of Grenada. He became a citizen and became their diplomat to the World Trade Organization. Like, obviously some kind of pay for play. And supposedly he lost his title after a new government came in last year, but he still calls himself His Excellency. So he is this crazy. He often refers to himself as that, or as HE. And recently, he's also been doing stuff with, apparently falling out of favor in Grenada. He's been doing stuff with the island nation of Dominica, which is also in the Caribbean, very small, poor country. And the Caribbean, really has been this sort of colonialist test bed for cryptocurrencies. I mean, there's a Bahamian dollar, sand dollar. Obviously, FTX was in the Bahamas and had basically the whole place wired or paid for on their behalf. So that's kind of where Justice Sun fits in, I'd say, and also into sort of the Caribbean crypto landscape, where you see, all these nation states kind of experimenting with crypto at the behest of kind of shady foreign moguls.
Right. Now, with Justin Sun, I remember because this sort of, I guess, really highlight. And there were a few people who did this, but no one at the size of Justin Sun and his place in the industry. But I remember when Ukraine was raising money via crypto. He might have been the first, or if not the first, certainly the biggest name that did this, who offered to cut a deal with them where if they accepted Tron in order to pump Tron, like just promote Tron, if this is at the beginning of the war, right after, like immediately after Russia invades Ukraine, he's using social media to cut deals where he's like, if you accept Tron, I'll donate $1 million, like dangling a carrot over their head. Just such bizarre behavior. Even like, I feel like even like Sam Bankman-Fried, Do Kwon, and and CZ would have seen that and been like, man, that's desperate.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing with Justin Sun is like he's sort of a grubby, shameless operator. Like, he has this ridiculous, cheery like Telegram and meme and bot operation, but like he's sort of the kind of guy who seems like there's no deal he wouldn't do or no way he wouldn't self promote, including trying to get his shitcoin into a war zone. That is very much Justin Sun. And so just so we can be clear, I mean, he was recently charged by the SEC. This is a civil complaint, but with and through some of the companies he owns, like Tron, BitTorrent, something called Rainberry, which I actually am not even that familiar with. Basically, pump and dumps, market manipulation, securities violations, stuff like that. Again, the stuff that happens in this industry, but as almost a matter of course. One thing that's kind of interesting is that there are some celebrities and influencers who are mixed in, but this was interesting, the Justin Sun's SEC complaint, because one, it's pretty long and thorough, and it implicates other people, but also, this feels like the first of many, and I think that's something we can talk about with all these guys. Like, you have civil complaints against Sun and CZ, so even though we're sort of talking about fugitive life, those guys haven't been charged with anything yet. But we know there's a criminal investigation of some sort into CZ and Binance, and there has to be something similar with Sun. I mean, the kind of activities that they're being charged with, even just in a civil setting, are crimes when treated in criminal court, or these complaints that the government is filing appear to have evidence of crimes. It's certainly something that could easily be passed to the Justice Department if it doesn't have it already, or maybe that's where it came from. So it feels like we're going to be seeing a lot more of this stuff. And I mean, Justin Sun is my pick for the guy most likely to be living on a yacht off of the Seychelles in a few years. Like you said, CZ, like, he never comes to North America, but he does hold himself out as a legitimate operator. He meets with heads of state and not just like in small island nations, like with Macron,
Right.
and lives in Abu Dhabi, and like really wants to be seen as the leader of crypto because he is the most powerful figure in crypto. Sun is the guy who will be, just talking out of the other side of his mouth until he pulls into the wrong port.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned earlier the the under the table sort of undisclosed celebrity endorsements. Like, we saw FTX, and I'm sure Binance and Terra, I believe, might have done something too, like legitimate sponsors and like deals,
Oh, yeah.
clearly disclosing they were commercials. One of them even or not even, maybe even more than one of them, was regularly on like Major League Baseball stadiums. I think that was Terra, right?
So a couple, yeah. So Terra had a big sponsorship with the Washington Nationals. Amazingly, they paid up front. I believe Do Kwon is a South Korean citizen, but he went to Stanford. He has U.S. ties. And yeah, they paid for a Terra lounge, and it was on the outfield wall at the Nationals games, and they paid up front. So I guess, I don't know actually if they have it up this season, but they kept it up for the rest of last season. FTX, and this is something we talk about on our podcast. I mean, they had the FTX logo on umpires' uniforms, which I thought was kind of clever. Like, we say on the podcast, it associates them with sort of the people calling balls and strikes. The regulators of the game. The people are sort of ensuring fairness, ostensibly, like, and it kind of plays in this idea, we're FTX, we like the rules, and we're a responsible actor. So yeah, and FTX especially, I think one way it ran out of money pretty quickly was also it splashed a lot of money around.
That Larry David commercial.
Yeah, you'll have the big commercials, the Miami Heat arena deal, which was supposed to last 19 years, I believe, and it lasted 2. That was $135 million. And whereas, Justin Sun is more in sort of the influencer mold where, like, paying people for these like for tweets and backroom deals, and not like major ad campaigns.
Right, I think you're even being a little generous doing the influencer sponsorship. This is like shitcoin status. This is
Oh yeah, yeah.
because legitimate influencer deals. It's like you get an online influencer to just like they make a little video or tweet of them using your product and they let it be known that it's an ad. This was completely undisclosed. And really low tier, and not to diminish any of these celebrities if you're a fan of any of them, but what do these guys have to do with crypto? Why are they telling you to run some of the names down? Because they're charged too, by the way. They're in trouble with the SEC as well. Lindsay Lohan, Soulja Boy, who else was in this? Akon, Austin Mahone, Neo, Jake Paul, Lil Yachty, and porn star Kendra Lust. I mean, this is, again, not to attack any of these individual celebrities, but this isn't like a Larry David commercial where there's some like higher, story idea to promote this is just like, let's take advantage of these people's dumb fans. Honestly, that's usually what it is.
Yeah, it's not a very positive vision of this stuff. I mean, you're really just trying to trick people into FOMOing their way in. Certainly the celebrities don't know anything or have much reason to endorse one token or another. One thing that these complaints are good for also, though, is just showing like the various interconnections and self-dealing and like, like we said, everyone knows everyone, but also like, someone like Justin Sun is using sort of all of his own companies and he's not the only one like this, but like things that seem like they're not related are probably related. One hand is selling to the other. That's how wash trading works, for example. So, that's kind of the useful side of, or if you're fascinated by how some of these schemes work, you can see that in some of these complaints. And yeah, it's not very sophisticated. So, there's a lot here that the government can crack down on if they want to.
Right. And now let's. The thing is, there's so much we could get. Like, you did a whole 4-episode show on Sam Bankman-Fried. Each of these guys, I feel like, you could create a whole mini series about each one and go deep,
I'd like
super
to.
deep into. That'd be great. But let's now move on to what the allegations against CZ of Binance is. Now, he's the last on our list here, but possibly the biggest fish to catch. This is the guy who, people outside of the crypto world may not be familiar with him, but he's certainly the major player in the industry. He founded and heads up what is the largest crypto exchange in the entire world.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a big deal. Basically, CZ was just charged by the Commodities Future Trading Commission, the CFTC, along with one of his former colleagues, this guy Samuel Lim, and a bunch of companies that are part of the Binance empire. And it's a civil complaint, and it's various types of, again, market manipulation and potential instances of fraud and stuff like that, and just general misrepresentation of how Binance works. It's a 74-page complaint. It's pretty long, and there's a lot of stuff in here that indicating there are text messages, including ones from signal groups that supposedly had self-deleting messages on. There's communications between internal Binance employees. So I think besides what's alleged here, what it shows is that the U.S. government is looking very seriously at Binance. I mean, we already knew that, but like they have access to cell phones and communications, and besides, what monitoring where the money is going, and in a lot of ways, it looks like FTX because Binance is really as a thing, it's this broad network of companies and many shell companies. When FTX filed for bankruptcy, it was more than 100 companies, something like 130 companies filed for bankruptcy. And there are a lot of questions like, why does FTX have so many companies? They should have a few perhaps in different jurisdictions, but not so many. But what you see, of course, is all these companies are sort of hiding behind different shell companies in favorable jurisdictions and moving frequently. And one company owns another, which owns another. There are strange people listed as directors on a lot of these Binance companies. You and I had a long conversation about
Right. That was the
Guanying
last
Chen
episode, right? Yeah,
on
you came on.
a
Yeah, that was
yeah. I'm still waiting
that
for
one
her
is
to
still
pop
fascinating
here.
to me because it's it's so bizarre that this person who claims that they're just like some little fish in the Binance pond having this alleged control over the whole thing.
Yeah, and so one of the things that and actually I was waiting for Guanyin Chen's name to pop up, but I don't think she's in this document. But after we had that conversation and did that episode, and later Patrick Hillman, the Binance strategy comms guy who's online a lot, he described her to me in a public tweet as a co-founder, which I hadn't heard, which he had never said before. So it seemed like she got upgraded a little bit, but also it shows they may not be sure how to handle her. There's a company in the complaint called Sigma AG. This was supposed to be a market maker, or let's see, Sigma something AG, Sigma Chain AG, and this was supposed to be a market maker for Binance US. It's based in Switzerland, and according to CFTC, it's directly or indirectly owned by CZ. And actually, I'm pretty sure last time I checked, our friend Guanying Chen was a director of this company, Sigma Chain. So um, what they basically describe is there are tons of companies. CZ controls them all, and there's a lot of fishy kind of trading and potential market manipulation going on both Binance US and global Binance, where most of the traffic happens. And CZ allegedly controls 300 accounts himself, which is a little strange. There are these market makers or trading companies which seem to operate more on his behalf or behest than actually to, generate volume and activity on the platforms. And another thing that the CFTC has charged, and that we've actually saw in some recent reporting by the Financial Times, is that they really encourage people in various jurisdictions, both the U.S. and China, to use VPNs to access Binance Global, where more of the action is you can risk more, you can use more leverage or margin, that kind of stuff. So it's, I mean, these companies aren't who they say they are, I think, even if you accept a small percentage of this stuff is true. We still don't really know where Binance is based. We know that they at least have big offices in France and the UAE, but there's so much we come to accept, I think, as kind of abnormal, or like the abnormal comes to be accepted as normal with crypto. And then when you see it all laid out in like one of these civil complaints or something, or you really start talking about like who Justin Sun is or how CZ operates, you're like, this isn't normal. Like, this is how, yeah, shady companies operate, and potentially something more serious than that. But we're always told, CZ's latest thing is he has the number 4 for FUD. And anytime something happens, like a major article will drop or a CFTC complaint that has tons of detail of internal company workings that certainly looks really fishy, he'll just go, oh, it's 4. But like, dude, eventually you're going to run out of excuses. I mean, this stuff is starting to accumulate. And even some of the company's defenders, I think, are having a hard time explaining away why CZ, for example, has 300 accounts
Right.
to do his own trading.
And this just came out a few days ago where he had tweeted that there was a $1 billion recovery fund that would be moved into their crypto, and apparently they just took that money and put it in a corporate wallet instead.
Yeah, that I think was Leo Schwartz at Fortune who reported that, and that so we've had this pump basically of crypto the last month or so, especially Bitcoin, and the industry's all excited again, as if like we aren't still in the midst of ongoing failures, but. I was trying to figure out why. It's hard to really figure out why, but Tether has printed something like $7 billion, maybe more, in March. I didn't look at the final numbers. I really doubt that anyone's giving Tether $7 billion in cash. But then you had other things going on. One sec, that you get the neighborhood soundtrack here.
I love it.
I live in Little Caribbean. they call it. Anyway, and then you had things like Binance, which said that they were going to buy $1 billion worth of native crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other stuff. And yeah, they seemingly just put this industry rescue fund that was supposed to be their version of doing what Sam and FTX were doing over the summer, like picking survivors, bailing out companies. Instead, they just moved it to another company wallet and was their own stablecoin, about $1 billion worth of BUSD. So, there are things like this that just happen all the time. Like there are tweets, people were pointing these out months ago that when remember, like it seems like another thing we forgot about. Remember when all these companies were doing fake audits, like
All
things that
right.
weren't audits, like proof of reserves or attestations and all this stuff. And then they all got pulled from the internet because all the auditing companies started being afraid of liability, I think,
Right.
and realizing that they were kind of doing not real audits that were holding themselves out as something like an audit. And at that time, Binance was moving around all this crypto, millions, billions of dollars worth of crypto, and they were claiming, "Oh, this is how we show our proof of reserves by this new method we figured out." And then people were posting screenshots of tweets from CZ weeks earlier in reference to FTX saying, "Don't trust companies that move a lot of crypto around before or after audits." And it's like, dude, like this isn't complicated. Like you guys all do the same thing. So, Binance is really at a bigger scale and has been able to keep the plate spinning for a while. But and they have succeeded in being highly distributed as a company globally. But eventually, it doesn't look that different, I think, than FTX. It's just bigger and perhaps more elusive, and perhaps maybe a little more sophisticated in how it's operating.
Right. What is the significance between the two different U.S. agencies that?
Oh,
Because
sure.
everyone we've spoken about so far, I believe, if it wasn't a criminal charge, it was they were it's the SEC going after them. But with CZ so far, we're talking about the CFTC going after at him. Is there a significance there as to why they would be on this particular uh, thing with the CZ?
Well, one of the problems is that we do have these two different agencies regulating commodities and securities. There's the CFTC for commodities, and then there's the SEC for securities. And there used to be reasons for this stuff. It's not very interesting to get into. But basically, something like 7 or 8 years ago, the CFTC basically stuck a flag in the ground and said Bitcoin is a commodity, we regulate it. And there's been other sort of turf wars. The problem is that you have these turf wars between regulators. The CFTC was widely seen as more industry friendly until FTX went down, and now they have a lot of work on their hands. But the CFTC also has about a third of the budget of the SEC. The SEC is considered more of an more aggressive enforcer. Gary Gensler, the chair of the SEC, was known as a crypto skeptic in some ways, at least, or at least of the industry. So I think people were worried that Sam and company were going to get what they wanted, which was CFTC jurisdiction more broadly over the industry. And we were almost lucky in some ways, sort of kind of as a country, frankly, or as an economic system, that Sam, one, didn't get his laws passed and didn't get his hooks deeper into the banking system, which he really wanted. And that kind of some of this collapse happened when it did, because it changed the terms, I think, of the turf war between the two agencies. Like the CFTC can't be as pliant anymore. So I don't know what it necessarily means that like one got to him before the other or something like that. But I think, just because the CFTC files a complaint doesn't mean there's not going to be an SEC one. There could be other civil. Those are always civil. The SEC can refer a criminal complaint or refer someone to the Justice Department for potential charges. So, there's lots of potential here for enforcement if you want to decide you're a fan of state power, or at least want something to be done to rein these people in or some kind of accountability. But I think, yeah, you're going to see the civil side with the CFTC and SEC, and that can really do a lot. It can also, I mean, the Fed is already, frankly, discouraging banks from working with crypto companies. Crypto companies are complaining that there's a war against them by the Fed. I think that's kind of true, but I think it's merited because just look at the last year, like they basically brought it on themselves. And then, I think that there have been prosecutions by the Justice Department, and especially here in New York, the Southern District of New York. I wrote a piece for TNR about Damian Williams, the U.S. attorney who's prosecuting SBF and FTX and all that, and then the Eastern District of $100 million Ponzi schemes, which barely make the news, but they're $100 million crypto Ponzi schemes, and they've been prosecuted and shut down. So there is stuff happening. There are criminal charges happening for other people besides the top players. But there is, the Biden administration has tried to encourage some kind of like general whole of government strategy and information sharing. There are these executive orders and stuff like that. So there's no reason why the SEC can hand a bunch of information over to the Department of Justice and say this looks illegal to us, or other way around.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's been fascinating just to watch how quickly this all sort of, after I feel like years of critics and skeptics in this world saying, what's going on? Everyone seems asleep at the wheel while these guys launder money, straight up lie to their audience, and just literally scam in many ways their investors, their customers, their clients. And then just to see everything sort of I don't know whether to thank Do Kwon or SBF, maybe the both of them for kicking this off, because it really was a team effort. I think.
It is both, and like it's hard to underrate the fact that regulators, it takes time to spin this machine up, kind of. I think the Biden administration had to come in and change policy, frankly, but also the government never wants to be seen as popping the bubble or already the industry complains enough of their supposed victimization as is. But once, major players start to go down kind of their own, the industry complains that, FTX had to go offshore, blah, blah, blah. But, they basically went down of their own inconsistencies and crimes. Then it's easier for the government to come in and say, all right, now we're going to clean this up. You guys can't handle yourselves. We're finally going to do some regulations, some enforcement, and some prosecutions. But it did take those guys. And, Sam was the nerdy face of crypto in the English-speaking world, in all the commercials and on Capitol Hill and on TV, DMing reporters, whatever. So it did kind of take that face of crypto going down, and now being a guy who's living with his parents in Palo Alto, possibly using stolen money, according to Forbes, to fund his defense, and wearing an ankle monitor. That's what's happened to the face of crypto. And that's one thing I've been trying to tell people is for a lot of the regular public, normies or just whoever, people who bought in a little bit, people who ignored crypto, that's what they think now when they think of crypto. You have a lot of denial or justification or rationalization in the industry where they think it's not just Sam or we're going to move on from this stuff, but there's a huge gulf in perception between the people who think that they're still inventing the future with crypto or that they're going to have another bull run and make money again, and the broader public who just doesn't want this or lost their money or has their money stuck on FTX. And those two visions, I think, well, they don't even need to be reconciled. It's just going to play out, I think, where the industry will find that its customers aren't there when they think the next bull run is going to come around.
Right. And just to, not to go down another rabbit hole, but I got to mention it because I a few weeks ago I did an episode on what was going on with Silicon Valley Bank, but the pro crypto VCs and the crypto industry themselves must be loving this Silicon Valley Bank thing, collapse happening at the perfect moment. When the SEC, like we were just talking about, all of a sudden is throwing the book at all these various different crypto companies and founders, for them to all of a sudden just try to use what happened with Silicon Valley Bank to pretend look, the U.S. government's afraid of crypto now because they would be the replacement for this failing banking system, and now but they're coming after crypto to stop it. What a perfect spin for them. What a great timed spin for them. It's just amazing to watch it in real time.
Yeah, and there's always been this positioning going on, and because crypto, I think, is always looking for a use case and kind of a compelling story to tell, there is a lot of that whenever something happens, like, okay, why is this good for crypto, or why does this justify our narrative? So, I went on CNBC a week or two ago and was asked, like, is crypto becoming a safe haven during this mini banking crisis? And I was like, no, but that's, that was the narrative that week. And the funny thing about SVB, which is a mess, and like I wrote about and talked to folks about, but like, in some ways, the system kind of worked. I mean, the FDIC came in. They bailed out the bank in ways that I and a lot of people don't like, but like there was minimal disruption to the larger banking industry. So like, but crypto comes in and is like, oh, this is our chance. Like, we're going to be the replacement. Like, you're talking about like trillions of dollars, like huge U.S. banking system, and you think like people are going to flee to safety in Bitcoin and Ethereum, and that's it? Like, come on. Right. It's just this really like. It reminds me of when Sam Bankman-Fried said that FTX might one day buy Goldman Sachs. It doesn't mean that Goldman Sachs is like better, or Wall Street is better or something, or more deserving of its preeminence that it currently holds. But it's like, who are you kidding?
Right.
Like, know who you're up against. Know your enemy.
Right.
And that's it. That's one thing that I think crypto either doesn't get or refuses to acknowledge sometimes, especially as they seek either hyper Bitcoinization or huge scale. Like, maybe this isn't something that's going to scale. I mean, right now, even just tonight, we're talking about 4 of the biggest figures in crypto, and they're all under either serious investigation or facing criminal charges, or could be one day. Like, they're all in various forms of legal jeopardy, and probably will be for years. And those are 4 of the biggest industry figures. I mean, to anyone who's coming at this sort of from another angle, or perhaps semi-objectively, which probably isn't us, they might say like, well, this seems like a troubled industry. And again, like that's not within our control. We'll see how the dominoes continue to fall. But I think any sort of optimism you have about this stuff shaking out in kind of a sustainable way has to be misplaced. But we're still hearing it because the industry is all hype.
Right. Well, you just heard Jacob, everybody. Go to your local bank, withdraw all your money, and pour it into Bitcoin, Ethereum. Dogecoin's pumping as we speak right now, thanks to
of course,
Elon Musk changing the Twitter bird logo to the Doge meme, like that Shiba Inu dog. Just unbelievable. This is gonna be what replaces your the banking industry, an industry rife with scams, with some of the most notorious fugitives in some cases, literally propping themselves up with currency created after decade-old memes at this point. Just really stunning. But that's gonna replace it all, my friend. Get with the new age, Jacob.
Why can't we embrace blockchain and just understand that this is the future? I don't know.
Right. Jacob Silverman, freelance writer who writes about crypto and technology, has this great podcast out with CBC right now, 4-part miniseries called The Naked Emperor, all about FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried. And also, when is the book with Ben McKenzie coming out?
That's July. Yeah,
July,
right. July, and now I'm back on my own freelance grind and writing articles and stuff like that. So I hope to be doing more about FTX too. I mean, obviously this is fertile ground, but hopefully there'll be more. Maybe another podcast. We'll see.
Right. Well, Jacob, why don't you take the opportunity right now to let everyone know where they could find you online, drop any links,
sure.
Social media handles, floor is yours.
On Twitter, I'm Silverman Jacob, and I sort of reviving my Substack just as place to send out announcements from. That's jacobsilverman.substack.com, and someday soon jacobsilverman.com will be working again, but right now it's sleeping. So yeah, Twitter and Substack, and I write a lot for the New Republic and various other places, so I should have some articles coming out in the next month or two about some of these companies, and also some sort of weird corners of kind of crypto connected stuff that I think has been ignored. And yeah, get in touch, send me tips. I'd love to talk to folks.
Thanks for joining me, Jacob. Always a pleasure.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And getting back to that fifth individual I was talking about earlier, that NFT hustler Donald Trump, while his alleged crimes might not be cryptocurrency related, I think you will see a Scam Economy episode diving into the various different Trump crypto connections coming in the not so far off future. And to support the work that goes into producing those future episodes of Scam Economy, be sure to go to patreon.com/mattbinder to become a monthly paying subscriber. Again, your support helps this show grow. And to catch the video version of this show every week, be sure to subscribe to the channel at youtube.com/mattbinder. You can also check my live streams there and on my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/mattbinder. And if you're an Amazon Prime subscriber, be sure to connect your Amazon account to your Twitch account so you can get a free Twitch Prime subscription every month. That's right, at no extra cost to you. You can force Amazon to give a small portion of the payment you already give them each month to your favorite creator. I'm telling you this in hopes that that creator is me. You can check out all the links to the audio podcast version of this show at scameconomy.com. And while you're at Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts, be sure to leave a review for the show because it helps push this show up the podcast chart rankings, and in turn it helps bring more eyeballs to the show. You can follow the show on Twitter at Scam Economy. You can follow me on Twitter at Matt Binder. And with all that said, I'll see you all next time on the Scam Economy.